Whenever gun control is brought up online, there will always be an army of people posting infographics comparing those wanting tougher restrictions to Hitler and the Nazis, who, they say, enacted harsh gun control measures. There is one problem with this: it simply isn't true. And, in fact, the inverse is true. Let's go back a bit and see who really enacted gun control measures in Germany. Before we begin though, a quick disclaimer. This video is in no way, shape or form political and is purely a work of history. Please don't ever think it, and make it into something it is not. Thank you. In the story of German gun control, the best place to begin is back in the Holy Roman Empire. Even back then, weapons were essentially unrestricted, and these loose measures continued right into the German Empire. Changes only really came after the end of the Great War, when the Allies sought to impose the Treaty of Versailles upon the German people. Amongst the terms was Article 177, which banned all civilian usage of firearms, as well as any civilian instruction of their use. Even civilian recreational shooting activities were banned, and any clubs related to shooting were to be shut down. Hunters and the police were to be restricted to using only pistols. To comply with these terms, the Weimar government passed the Regulations on Weapons Ownership in 1919, which declared that, quote, all firearms, as well as all kinds of firearms ammunition, are to be surrendered immediately, end quote. The penalty for anyone in possession of a firearm in Weimar Germany was set at 5 years in prison and a fine of 100,000 marks. In 1920, the so-called Law on the Disarmament of the People was enacted, which further restricted military-type weapons in accordance with Versailles. But why was all of this done? The terms of the Treaty of Versailles were harsh, and the Allies knew it. If the Germans were to put up with essentially being slaves to international finance for the next few generations, so they could keep up their reparations payments, then the people needed to be pacified, weak, and unable to rise up. The Weimar government, too, would obviously have been happy to enact such measures. The government was, of course, deeply unpopular with any German who had an ounce of testosterone in his body. The regime was weak, pacifist, degenerate, and foreign. If the German people weren't disarmed, then it would have been all too easy for them to throw off their chains the second the Allies were preoccupied with other matters. Making the German people accept this humiliation, however, was easier said than done, and the laws implemented early on during the Weimar period failed to put a complete stop to gun use and ownership. In 1922, as part of the Republic Protection Act, it became illegal to not report on your fellow citizens if you knew they had possession of firearms, amongst other such restrictions. The Law on Firearms and Ammunition was passed in 1928, which actually relaxed gun restrictions. Ownership was now allowed for certain weapons, but their use and the instruction on their use remained illegal, as per the Treaty of Versailles. A strict firearm licensing scheme was put into place to acquire the rights to said ownership. Separate permits were required to own and sell firearms, carry firearms, manufacture firearms, and professionally deal in firearms. Only those, quote, people whose trustworthiness is not in question and who can show a need for a gun permit, end quote, were allowed in this new club. Gypsies, as well as political opponents and critics of the regime in general, were excluded. In 1933, of course, everything in Germany would change, and the National Socialists swept to power, and within months they had won over the entire nation, making them the most popular government by far in German history. Now that the people were actually on board with their rulers, there was much more room for trust, and the laws could be amended. There was nothing to fear in terms of a coup or a revolution. When the party came to power, the previous laws were actually enforced against Germany's Jewish community for the first time. Jews were found to have been disproportionately and essentially openly flouting Germany's gun laws, and the party, of course, was more than happy to take advantage of this. As of 1935, no new permits were given to any Jews in Germany, as they were deemed to be untrustworthy foreigners. Criminals, including homosexuals, were also not given permits. In 1938, the German Weapons Act was passed, which superseded the 1928 law mentioned earlier regarding permits. Now, restrictions only applied to handguns, and the legal age for purchasing a weapon was lowered from 20 to 18. Permits were now to last for 3 years, not 1. Party members, government workers, and hunters were to have no gun ownership restrictions at all. As for manufacturing, this continued to require a permit, but new laws to exclude foreigners were introduced, much like the Weimar laws, which excluded gypsies. Now, any company which had any Jewish ownership could not get involved in Germany's arms manufacturing industry. Later in the year, a new law was introduced after a Jewish gunman had assassinated a German diplomat in Paris. This group, who were already seen as untrustworthy foreigners, now became even more detested. The day before the new law, in fact, Kristallnacht had taken place. Germany was becoming a nation very hostile to these outsiders. As per these new regulations, the Jews were banned from owning any type of weapons, including bladed weapons. To summarise, the German gun control talking point is complete nonsense. The Germans had enjoyed great freedoms in this regard up until the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler effectively abolished these restrictions entirely for party members, which was millions upon millions of Germans. This is quite a way off of disarming the German people, as is claimed. One could only state that Hitler rearmed the Germans, but disarmed foreigners in Germany. This would absolutely be true. Such a law wouldn't look out of place in modern-day America if soon-to-be President Trump were to disarm newly arrived immigrants and reduce gun control measures for the American people themselves. In 1945, Hitler's gun control laws would be completely undone. Once Germany capitulated, the Allies once more completely disarmed German society, and this is how things remain today, where very few Germans own weapons of any kind. The reality then is the inverse of the talking point. Hitler didn't disarm the Germans, the Allies did, twice. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then please do leave a like, it helps immensely. An especially big thank you to all my Patreon, Subscribestar, and YouTube members who have signed up on one of the links in the description. Without your kind financial support, these videos simply wouldn't be possible, and I cannot thank you enough.